call to order this meeting of PROSTAC, June 20th, 2018. Let's see. Corey, Nuria, and Corbett are all known absent, so we're okay there. So let's go to public comment. Any?
Ken Lish, 1326 South Idalia Court. First and foremost, I wanted to say thank you to PROSTAC for all the hard work you guys are doing on the community center. I thought coming and seeing how you guys set this up last night, all the hard work that you and staff have done was excellent. I look forward to hearing the results, so thank you very much for all that. Second, I wanted to follow up on a topic that I presented to this committee at the beginning of the calendar year. The topic is adding a playground to Northwest Rock Creek. The reason I'm bringing this back to you guys is just because it's been about 6 months since I brought it up. I want to make sure it doesn't fall through the cracks. I wanted to emphasize again how important it is to the community in the area. Just a quick reminder of the facts. For lack of a better term, this area is kind of a playground desert. The area in question is bordered to the north by downtown Superior, to the east by 88th, to the south and southwest by Rock Creek Parkway, and then to the west by McCaslin. There's over 450 homes in this area, and there's no direct access to a playground without crossing Rock Creek Parkway, which is one of the busiest streets in town. There's no other area in all Superior that has such a high population without having direct access to a playground. To emphasize and try to gather a little bit more support for this, I posted a thread to the local nextdoor.com website. I'd like to emphasize this is a very small targeted contract rate for the population that's in that area, but despite that, I got a lot of support, not only on the post, but there were at least 4 comments that went directly, or 4 emails that went directly to the board in support of this that I was CC'd on. Just to bring a little bit of the narrative that was coming from these, from a few excerpts from the emails to the board. I'm writing to voice my support for adding a playground in Northwest Superior. Please consider this project, as we are the only area in Superior without direct, close access to a playground. Speaking from personal experience, crossing Rock Creek with small children to access Purple Park can be terrifying. We've had a number of close calls with cars speeding down Rock Creek and not paying attention to pedestrians. From another email, it's been an issue of concern in our household that my children will need to cross a major street to access playgrounds. I know it will be important to the current and potential residents in the future. And then from a third email, I want to share my safety concern that there's not a playground in Northwest Rock Creek. My daughter and I have to cross Rock Creek Parkway anytime we want to get to a playground. I very much support and any project that would add a playground to the northwest corner. And then a few from the Nextdoor thread. Yes, please. I have the same concern for my children. The fact that we don't have a place where children could go for play without crossing Rock Creek is a problem. And then a final one. This would be amazing, and we talk about this all the time when we walk around the neighborhood. Every other area of Rock Creek has access to at least a pocket park within a reasonably safe, i.e. not crossing a major 4-lane road distance. Thanks so much for getting this going. So between the emails and the responses, I think there's an established demand for this amenity. And just to really emphasize, this was just a single social media site. There was no direct mail, didn't use the CAC, there was no canvassing, no community meetings or outreach, no other social media. So there was a lot of demand that was shown by a very minimal effort. I proposed this to or I brought this back to the town board at their last meeting and asked that they direct town staff to include construction for a playground in this area in the FY 2019 budget. It will help ensure that the safety of our children by not forcing them to cross Rock Creek Parkway when they want to walk or bike to a playground. And it'll bring a much-needed amenity to a highly populated area. What I'm asking of you guys tonight is that you please keep this in mind and as a high priority topic within your busy work plan. And I offer my assistance or any other input I can possibly give to help out on this. So thank you very much for your time and consideration on that topic. Finally, As many of you know, I'm also the chair of OSAC. We finished our review of the 5-year trail plan, and the one thing that I thought I could share with you to help add context to what we saw is the combined rankings put Shan Shan, the Shan Shan Trailhead, at number 7. I know one of the concerns that you all as PROSTAC have had is the access to a Shan Shan Trailhead off of a very busy McCaslin on a steep hill. That's been one of our concerns as well. I wanted to share with you that we brought this up at the dinner we had with the board earlier this year, and one of the things that was discussed and agreed to that would be our major focus and push as a town is to try to get access from the roundabout that is at the bottom of that hill. So there'd be some type of road constructed from the roundabout that would parallel McCaslin. So that hasn't gone unnoticed, and it's something that we as OSAC would love to see moved up. It's something we'll probably bring up at a leadership meeting, but wanted to add context to the one comment that we had. So thank you very much, everybody, for your consideration.
Thanks,
Thank
Ken.
you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? No? Okay, so let's move on to the first agenda item, being community center. So on here we have it as review feedback from last night's public meeting, and to continue to discuss, you know, like an alternate design. That the way the meeting was held last night, the format, we don't have the feedback. We didn't, you know, we only heard what we talked, you know, one-on-one about when we walked around, and what we read on Post-it notes. But I don't think that was there read all those Post-it notes last night. So I think we're really going to have to wait until staff finishes compiling all those notes before we can really talk about it. Same thing with, you know, we had discussed in our last meeting an alternate design that was not presented to the public, and so we don't really have anything to comment further on an alternate design at this point. So I think this topic's really going to just be limited to reminding us of like what the next steps are, reminding us that we'll be at the 4th of July meeting to talk about it. So Allison, I don't know how much you have to really update us on, you know, but my understanding from Patrick is, you know, the board still hasn't basically approved an alternate design yet. So, like, is that what are they going to look at that again in a week and a half? Or Sandy, maybe you know this, or is the board going to look at that again in a week and a half? So when we have our next public meeting, we might be talking about a second design.
We have not been asked to discuss the alternate design. We did it, some of us sort of forced the issue at the last meeting. We have not discussed financials at all. The one thing that I would say is that it sounds like, from what I'm hearing from the town manager, although I don't know this to be a fact, my sense is that the board meeting on July 9th will be significantly committed to the topic of the community center. And so if you guys can put it on your calendars, because obviously you've been very engaged and we want to hear from you, and I think it would be valuable for you to be at that meeting if you can. And that's about all I know right now. You guys don't know a darn thing more than I know right now. I mean, we did get some preliminary financial information, but the board has not discussed it at all.
Right. So I think that the way that leaves it is that this committee should just be prepared to talk about the same materials as were presented last night at the 4th of July. Probably have the big, one of those big printouts that had the architectural layout as well as some of those, just mock-ups of what it would look like interior, and as well as maybe the financials. I mean, they were presented last night. Maybe they might be withdrawn from us to continue the show, but possibly But either way, I mean, we'll probably only be talking about the one design unless the board says something else between now and the 4th of July. But it sounds like they're not going to say it until July 9th. Then we just have the same material to work off of, and we'll look to continue to get feedback on that. We can remind people of whatever the next meeting is going to be. Hopefully we'll know that date by the 4th of July. And then that there's a survey out there, I believe, right? A Survey Monkey
There is.
seeking feedback, so we can direct people at our booth to formally fill out a survey if they want to give feedback if they haven't already.
Yeah, one of the comments I would make, Peter, is the board is not scheduled to have any discussions prior to the 4th of July.
Okay.
So any concrete information you can gather, I don't know how you're going to do it. Are you going to do it anecdotally? Are you going to have people write comments down, sticky notes like they did last? That would be the only other comment, because that is another opportunity to engage the public. When we took out committee people and the board last night, I think there were probably 20 people maybe who showed up. You guys, 28 who were not board members or committee members, which is 28 people out of probably 8,000 adults. So, anything
Right.
you can do to gather more. And then I am hoping that we can convince the financials that we've seen at this point are the recommendations of the staff. The board has not commented on them. We have not debated on them. I just had a chance to look at them today. I would hope that possibly those financials could be shared with you guys, and you could have a handout or a chart or something that it's strictly how we would pay for where the revenue sources are and stuff. So one of the things I'm going to ask is that you have the ability to share that also, because it's significant information that I think the public needs to be aware of. Now, I might get shot down on it, but
Well, right. I mean,
if we know it, it's not confidential at this point.
Yeah,
so.
unless for some reason the board tells staff not to present it again. It was presented last night, so we could basically mimic the exercise last night and have one of those big maps and the sticky notes and have people do the sticky notes, and we could probably have a printout with the link to the Survey Monkey, so we could say, if you don't have time or,
Right.
the interest in doing the sticky note thing at the booth, then, here's the link. You can go online at your leisure and
You do not,
go
the
to the Survey
financials that
Monkey.
we were presented were not presented last night.
Well, no, I mean,
Yeah.
what was presented last night.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all I'm saying is what was presented last night is obviously public information at this point. I mean, it was presented at a public meeting. So I don't know why we couldn't show that again.
And all of the information that was presented last night is within the survey, the financials, the
Okay.
floor plans, and the renderings, and also the timeline. And was the timeline something that PROSTAC was also interested in having at 4th of July?
I would say all the materials that we presented last night. If we can just get at least like one of the little stand-up card for the timeline, a little stand-up card for the, the sales tax membership info, and then one of those big printouts. I mean, it have to be put on something more stable because we're outside and we always get hit by wind and stuff. But I mean, it have to be put on. We'll have to get some type of board or something to tack it to. But I think we just do that for the 4th of July.
Yeah, I discussed that with Patrick last night to make sure we have, and else make sure we have it, because we need to have that. Because my impressions from last night is that's the one they're working off of. That's what we got. That's all we've got. Let's just leave it there. For whether there's a secondary one or not, that's going to be discussed July 9th. actually July 9th may be who knows what's gonna happen July 9th. If it's gonna be primarily about that, you guys may actually come to a vote on it and figure out if it's gonna go on the ballot or not anyway. And that would make, because there's meetings for July 16th, isn't it?
16th and 18th, and that
But
might
ours
be-
is the 18th. Our next meeting is
Yeah,
the
that's our
18th,
meeting.
so kind of
In terms
confusing.
of inviting the public for more feedback, I mean,
Right.
that might be, if there is a second rendering or if there is more information.
Right.
So
That would
let
be
the public
decided.
know, like, even if you came to one of the early meetings, you might wanna also, if they're coming to this one too. There's more.
Yeah. Sure, Jim.
Jim Payne, Superior Resident. When you refer to an alternate plan, are you referring to an alternate version? Is that something that exists?
Well,
Just for my
so
information, I don't.
It's been discussed.
PROSTAC from its last meeting put forward a alternate design kind of request, I
Right,
guess.
okay. So that's what
of
you're referring to.
staff.
Yeah.
CAPS basically did the same thing, is my understanding. So between those two and whatever other committees might have, I don't know if the youth council was asked to comment on this, but staff basically has feedback from committees, as well as now potentially a lot of feedback from sticky notes to go back and get a second design between now and July 9th, if that's the interest of the board and the town manager to see a second design. If they're gonna wait till the 9th to even consider whether or not they wanna put forward a second design, that's obviously out of all of our control. And that may or may not be ready by the 16th, if they wait till the 9th to even give staff the approval to work with an architect on the second design. But there's enough information out there right now, especially after last night, for staff to work on alternate design, in my opinion.
So it's reorganizing the pieces.
Yeah, just
Of
a
that,
correction,
to answer
Peter.
your
I
question.
went back and read the memo. This is not on the regular agenda. This is on the work session agenda.
On the
And
9th?
On the 9th, and Matt says he's hoping to start at 5, which I'm writing back and saying, serious concerns about this being at a work session because people cannot make a meeting at 5 o'clock.
Right, and well, and you also have issues of, I mean, you can't really have public comment at a work
Yeah.
session. You can't really make decisions in a work session,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So,
But that is the next board meeting,
it is.
July 9th. You don't have
It
another
is.
one this month, so.
I thought there was one in a week and a half.
We don't have another board meeting until July. We're off in the month
Oh,
of June,
I don't know
second
why,
meeting.
I thought someone said last night that you had a meeting in a week and a half. Okay.
I'd just make a comment then.
Yeah.
My concern is that this sort of all or nothing $20 million, $19 million approach, which I have serious doubts about its passing politically. I mean, the political reality, I don't think is good, although this, correct me if I'm wrong, but this will be the first such ballot initiative like this in a November mail-in election.
Right.
I think in the past, it's been in the smaller April election where you have people who tend to be more
Yeah,
knowledgeable.
the last ballot question, I think it was 2012, and that wasn't even, build a facility or not. Wasn't it like approval for a survey to look at building a facility? I mean,
I don't
it-
know.
it's been a while. I think that the only actual facility ballot question, I think you have to go back to like,
02 or something, yeah.
no, like 94
Right.
or something, like very early in Rock Creek.
So my concern, and I don't really see the board in total anyway, there's some members who are aware of this, and maybe I would encourage PROSTAC to consider this, that if you ask yourself, from all that we've learned and all that we know from the last 7 or 8 years of looking at this, what is the consensus among PROSTAC, the board, everybody who's involved, as to what is really needed, really a must-have, not a nice-to-have, that's going to have substantial widespread support, and have see if there's any consensus about what that is. And it's not a 19 or $20 million rec center as proposed. That may pass, I don't think it will, but that's not something that you can say is going to have a guarantee of widespread support that the community knows it needs. And my concern is that there's no fallback. So this goes out on a ballot as a controversial $19 million expenditure with the sports stable connection and fails, then everything's dead. I don't know how we recover. And I as the person who led this effort for many years and who oversaw the statistical survey that we put a lot of money and the town put a lot of money and effort into, I can tell you one of the biggest obstacles we had, and some of you were there, was the attitude in the town, here we go again. I mean, we've been asked this so many times. And here we are again with a proposal which doesn't have consensus, because even the board is split on it. And don't think that, you know, the people in town are not going to know that. And I think it's a prescription for, it's not a very rosy outlook as far as I'm concerned. But my big concern is that we go all or nothing on this plan, it gets voted down or fails, and then we've got nothing. Then you're going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult, and you have a new board that has to get up to speed on it. It's going to be very difficult to come back and get the things that we all know we need.
As opposed to having like a tiered option.
Right, and
on
my advice, my suggestion, which I've made to some people, is that it should be a two-part ballot, where you say, phase one is X, and put in there the things that everybody, whether it's trustee A, B, C, you guys, everyone who's involved, can agree on that we really have to have these things. And that's not going to be 20, that's going to be 8 to 12 million. I mean, we have these numbers, we've looked at it many times, and you've looked at it, it's been presented to you. So, and say, should the town of Superior, and you'd have to have visuals of it, you'd have to show people, make it tangible. And everyone would understand what it is, and then you go to the ballot, and you say, shall the town of Superior go forward with whatever the financing proposal is for this phase one? And then you describe phase two, which are all the more hardcore rec center items that are, expensive and may have support and may not. And you say to the voters, shall the town of Superior go forward on this now? And see what they say. And then you've got all the answers you want, and then you've got, you haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater. You haven't killed the opportunity to get things that this town really needs. And everybody says it, and everybody knows it, and the surveys, show it, and our anecdotal conversations with people show that. So anyway, that's my concern, that we end up with nothing after all of this effort. And I would hope that you can work to avoid that outcome.
I think that's good feedback, thank you.
Thanks,
And
Jim.
I think, it's all in the way it's presented, right?
Yeah, I
So
mean,
much of the time.
I think it's probably somewhat unconventional if you put like an ABC option on a ballot,
No,
but
it's not unusual.
I'd have to see examples. I haven't seen it before, but I don't think we're there yet. I mean, not tonight. I think we need to have a better understanding of the board on this. We need to see the feedback from last night. I have a lot of opinions on this that I just don't think that it's not the time or place really to discuss on this issue in general. I mean, we've made our recommendations to the board right as of now, and I don't feel like we have enough to change any kind of recommendation or even really discuss a change to a recommendation. I think that's coming soon, but probably not till, the July meeting.
What would it take to poster boards and sticky notes up, say at the sports stable in the lobby, North Pool and South Pool, so that residents who are using those facilities might be able to quickly give feedback as well when they're already in places that they're recreating or.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, you probably have some issues of control over that.
I think your biggest issue is the fact that that facility is significantly used by non-residents.
Well, right, I would actually advise
Yeah.
against putting it in the sports stable. I think that's
Oh.
incredibly biased.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But
Yeah,
at
sure.
the north and south pool,
yeah,
or they have to show.
Very
Um,
different.
there's
Yeah, yeah.
ID,
just as
right,
much
there's,
as the-
DSS person that
Yeah.
yeah, just as
controls
much as
those.
like the 4th of July, I
Yeah.
think those are a little bit more, resident-focused, somewhat controlled environments
Mhm.
that I feel like you would probably get accurate feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the sports stable. And I would probably say like in any, private business, particularly one that might be affiliated with this, is probably not a good idea. But no, that's a good idea. We can talk to, staff about whether they think that that's appropriate to do like at the pools.
I think I'd just like to add, in thinking of your comments, Jim, and where we might put these sticky notes. Again, I think that we have, as a group, we've tried to kind of move away from it's a rec center to it's a community center. And this has been the focus of some of the discussions and the board meetings about, well, what community things are we going to have there in addition to our recreational amenities? And if you're asking people things like, what would you like to see in the new rec center? That's a different conversation than how would you like to see a community center evolve in Superior? I think it is anyway.
Yeah, you're right, and the third floor is all dedicated to community stuff.
Right
but-
now
but
it
I
is.
agree
No, it's
that
not.
A lot of what
Yeah.
Well,
we're-
But it's
in our
not.
proposed
Well,
alternate design it
right.
was, but
Yeah.
in the current design, it is not.
Right, and a lot of what I heard last night, just bopping around to the different things, were more programming things than actual facility things, and that,
Yeah, my only concern with presenting the one design and asking for feedback on the one design is it's focused on the one design. It's not, it's not saying, this is just a proposed design, we would love to get feedback on an alternate design. And it's not asking for, is this really the best location? Is this, is this really are these really the amenities that we want? I mean, it's not asking those more general questions. It's in a way, it's almost like the really kind of poorly done 2007 survey, which was like, here is a design. Would you basically, do you agree with this? Would you pay? I mean, it was so already baked that it just didn't go anywhere. And I get that we have to have a design out there, but I mean, I talked to several people last night, and it's like, yeah, you're not, there's still, and to Jim's point, like, you don't have a backup kind of, and so if this fails, where does that leave you? It's like, should we be talking about Town 15 in the same discussion in a fuller rec center? I mean, I know we're really not supposed to do that, but I mean, if it's still on the table, why not? I have similar concerns.
I think there's a little, although I like the idea of putting it the north and south pool, I think there is a value to having a discussion to be able to give more information. And so that would be my only concern, is if you put it up at the north and south pool, you don't have anybody who's
You
there to
don't have
discuss it.
anyone to
Whereas
bounce
last
off
night,
of.
Mhm.
Yeah.
we had you guys, we had members of the board who could kind of fill in on other questions. If somebody said, hey, what about this at the pool? You were able to say, oh, yeah, we did talk about that. Do you have a
You-
general interest for that? Whereas right now,
You have the same problem with the survey
yeah.
online. I mean,
hey.
it's, yeah, you're in
Survey-
you're in a vacuum when you're filling out those notes. You don't have staff, PROSTAC, board members to ask questions of. And that certainly was last night, you know, people were asking questions. And, I was able to talk to people and say, like, yeah, I mean, these are the issues we've talked about with pool, for example. Like, look, you're looking at a design just with a lap pool. And they would be like, oh, well, what's this little one? And it'd be like, it's basically a lazy river. We've talked about this. Here's a little bit more information for you to think about in making your comments. I mean, I wasn't trying to plant seeds, but I was trying to lend that idea to some of the people I talked to, that this design you're looking at, this is malleable. This is not concrete. You can make suggestions that drastically change this. And in my mind, that's actually what we want to hear. We don't want to hear, the pool is great. That's not really a constructive comment, to be perfectly honest. Because, I mean, yes, if you get 100, the pool is great, then you probably go, okay, the pool is great. But, and we don't have to change anything. But if you get, other comments of, well, where are my kids going to swim? This doesn't seem like it's family friendly enough. Like, those kind of comments and more even specific suggestions than that, I feel like right now are going to be more useful. And if you don't have someone, when you're filling out the comments, to bounce questions like that off of, you're probably not going to get those kind of comments.
Yeah. We didn't know, the board didn't know the survey was going out until after it was released. So the one other option, I thought it's real short notice, but there is a Jeff and Paige concert up at Community Park on Friday night. So if anybody had any interest and staff could provide the diagrams, you could probably go up in the shelter at Community Park. It's real short notice, but I just remembered that it was up there. Yeah, it could have been another opportunity if anybody had an interest to go up there, and I can't because I have a conflict, but it is another opportunity if anybody had some interest in going up there.
And maybe the things at North and South Pool are not to generate comments, maybe they're just informational, like, hey, there's meetings coming up, be sure to attend, or a way to capture them.
I hear what you're saying about the, I'm in my experience with PROSTAC and OSAC, I mean, I'm not one who's in favor of a committee opposing the board. But I think, so if you're not being asked to look at Town 15, or you're being asked not to look at Town 15 and that whole other set of options, okay, I can understand that. But I do think I think it's right for you to ask questions that have to do with what will make this successful, and are we asking the questions, and are we looking at the things that will make this a successful amenity if it's built, and those have to do with things like access and parking and ease of use. I mean, I'm happen to be through the HOA, because as you and two of you are involved with this, we use the one facility that we have, which is the community room at the fire station. Well, now we have one down here, but we've never been able to get scheduled in there. And they're very difficult to, we have to carry in materials, and we know the other groups that use it, the scouts, the various groups that use the community room at the fire station, they inevitably have, stuff to bring in and all that kind of thing. Now, you're putting that on the third floor of a building that has, where you're going to have to park, and maybe park and drop it off, although the circle will be gone, but park in a garage, walk over. I mean, I just think people are going to balk at that. And I don't think those things are really coming out and being expressed and being asked to really understand, okay, let's put aside the discussion of, you know, how many lanes and the pool and this, that, and the other thing, 1 gym, 2 gyms, all of the other structural things, and say, okay, what do we think, folks, is going to make this an amenity that's we're going to like, that people are going to adhere to? Because they have other alternatives for a lot of this stuff. And it's got to be a winning facility. And is parking important? Is ease of access important? I may be wrong. But as I look around at the facilities in Front Range that are successful, I think they have accessibility, parking, lots of comfort, lots of things that make it, easy to use for people. So you can ask those questions without having to bring up other sites or other alternatives, just to make sure that those things are being looked at, and that at the end it's going to be a successful facility that the people are really happy about, because it's going to be expensive.
Thanks, Jim. So unless anyone else has any thoughts, I think we'll.
Well, I would say that
move on from
my
this.
conversations with the people, I tried to switch away from the amenities, because everybody else was talking about what they liked about it. And my conversation and my concern as a resident, more than a committee member, is the marriage or non-marriage between impact, the stable, and how that whole thing works on the financial picture. I was trying to figure out what people thought. Most people don't have any understanding of how this all came to be. And I don't know how we get that across, because I don't have the answer. I'm asking the questions about what is impact involved in this? What is the stable involved in this? Why did it all of a sudden switch from us paying for it, them paying for it, to us paying for it, and we were just gonna, a joint venture more or less? Now it's more of an independent venture.
I did get a response from Town Manager Magley, and I can share the financial model that they've put together with you guys, so I will send it all
Okay.
to you. The one comment I would make is that the financial model as it currently exists says that Rough Rider Sports will get 50 hours of pool time a week. They will get 50 hours of, I'm trying to remember what the other thing was. I think the 50 hours, there was 50 hours of something else and 40 hours of classroom per week for 42 weeks of the year. So, and there was, I think it was about $650,000 a year in revenue would come from that organization. So I can share, that gives you a little bit more sense of, this would not be a facility that would be 100% available
Right, again.
to, and that's also not a discussion that we've had
Right.
as a
Yeah, that's
board.
huge.
Yeah,
But
I mean-
is that only if the town enters into a lease agreement with the sports stable, Impact Sports, or is that like a given, like the only way this project
That
happens?
is the current financial model for financing this project.
For your membership fees being $75 a month,
For
whatever
your
it was.
membership fees being,
The model they placed last night, that's.
Because I thought it was a separate lease agreement that the town could go into or could choose not to go into.
the current financial model has them buying in at that rate. Now, that doesn't say we're going to do it, but the financial model we're looking at right now, with the mill rate being whatever it is,
Right.
there is a $650,000 contribution coming from Rough Riders. And I asked Matt, could I share that with you guys? Because I didn't realize that until I heard it last night. So but he said it's a public document, so I absolutely can share it with
Boy,
you
it has to be,
guys.
everything has to be on
Yeah.
the table
I-
before we go to the ballot.
Yeah, but at this point, I don't know how
Right.
much of a public document it is. That's why I said I want to clear this with him before I release it. But he said I could, so I will send it to you guys.
Yeah, I mean,
Just for perspective, I'm just jotting down some numbers here. I mean, right now Flyers is using that pool about 35 additional
$30.
35 hours a week, plus an additional 30 hours all summer for our needs. And so some of the comments I heard last night is, how much time is actually going to be available for residents? And if Rough Riders is doing 50 hours a week, if that's the number you just gave me, that just to put that in perspective, that's a lot more than what Flyers is using it.
All right.
And as most of the committee members that have been here, at least while we had the last discussion, I mean, the Flyers agreement is not necessarily well liked by some in the community. I mean, it does block a lot of time out of that pool. And I mean, we understand the popularity of the program and everything, but like this agreement, it's not a town program. It's a private entity, and they're blocking out that much time in a public facility.
No, that's what I mean. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm fully aware that there's some people that don't like how much
Yeah.
Flyers have the pool, even though we are paying for it and we
Yeah.
are a Superior resident.
Here, I pulled up the chart.
Yeah.
It shows classrooms, 35 hour, they're talking about what the revenue model would be, what we would get in return. Classrooms, 35 hours per week, 35 weeks at 25 hours, at $25 an hour, 4 rooms, 40 hours a week. Basketball, 42 weeks, 2 courts, 50 hours a week. And the pool, 42 weeks, 50 hours per week. And the hours that are suggested are 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
It sounds like they should be building the facility.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure,
I mean,
with that.
And we could
And we rent it back
absolutely
for $650 for the other.
say no.
Well, no,
We
not-
could absolutely say no. And if we say no, we don't want to do that, then we have to make up that $682,000 in revenue from somewhere else. And that somewhere else would be sales tax and/or mills.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed that wasn't disclosed in the information that was presented last night. 'Cause
Yeah,
I
for
feel like
sure.
we would have gotten a lot of comments on that.
Well, and then there's the whole role of impact. Because I've heard everything from nothing to they're gonna run it for us. I mean, combination of any factor in between, who knows? It's not decided yet, I don't think.
I think
anybody's
some of
Yeah, I
that's
know,
not
it's just that
decided.
those numbers
I-
are
Well, I
astonishing.
know it's not decided.
I think that, I think that the town staff has made some comments that, well, the town would be probably better to manage the aquatics, whereas Impact might be better to manage the exercise area.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I don't think any of that's concrete. I think I think everyone's still pretty much clueless, on exactly what that model would look like.
Well, and I know,
Well, I
for
can
them to
send you
have the
what I
pool
got.
from 8 to 4,
Yeah.
that
And I will.
nixes the town of Superior's ability to hold Learn to Swim for all those little kids
Yeah.
during the day, and
50 hours a
Yeah.
week, that's, 10 hours a day, Monday through Friday, or 7 hours a day on
yeah,
average,
that's
so-
Well,
that's astonishing numbers,
That's
actually.
the thing, if you think about it the
So-
way that Jacques just said, like Monday through Friday, I mean, for them to block out any weekend is gonna probably be a huge problem with
Huge
most
deal.
residents. So if you only look at Monday through Friday, then you're basically saying 10 hours a day.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah,
how
and
many
this doesn't say
hours
when,
is the
it doesn't say
facility
what days of the
actually,
week.
right,
I mean, my-
right.
in use?
But it's going to limit the town of Superior to
Especially if you
actually
say,
do the
well, no
program
one
they
really
want to
wants
do.
use it between 10 and 2, or, 9
Midnight.
and 3 or whatever. So if all of a sudden, like, they're like, oh yeah, but your hours are 10 to 2, that's when the town, I mean, who's gonna use it on a weekday from 10 to 2?
Right. Right, and going back to the beginning, when we first started talking about a rec center, my concern from the get-go about a partnership with a private entity is that, yeah, usually you're going to have a balance of, private usage versus your town of Superior public usage. So, if it's a community center, I truly believe it should be prioritized for community access. Understanding the financial benefit of a partnership, I think it would make sense to, I don't know, I mean, almost, I know this is big picture, but present 2 options. One, you have a partnership and a lower tax impact and a lower cost. Or 2, you have, 100, a town center, a community center, rec center that's 100% dedicated to the town, but it'll cost more.
It'll cost more, yeah.
And see what the public has to say about that, because for sure, like I said, from the get-go, my concern with the private partnership is that it will inevitably lead to times that the community cannot access it. So,
Mhm. No, I totally agree with that.
No. Anyone else on this?
Yeah, just
Okay.
looking at the financials last night too, like how many people that are not Town of Superior residents would purchase a punch card or,
Membership.
yeah, membership at a higher
I
rate.
had that question of someone and
It
I think
depends what, it depends what
especially-
it offers. At
Right.
the end of the day, it depends what it offers.
Right,
If you,
right,
you know,
right.
if you can go, whatever.
Right.
Say
Well,
they
yeah,
put
I'm-
it, say they do with the floor, and it drops the floor, and you can, somehow you put a diving, but you may have more interest.
Right.
Whereas if you don't, you just have a straight lap pool, and
Right,
you're right,
right.
who's gonna pay for the, who's gonna pay, you know, that's lifetime's gamble, it's that you're gonna pay the extra money, cause we're gonna give this stuff to you that you like.
Mhm.
And if you don't like it, you walk away, so that's the, you know,
Right.
you're exactly right, it's what are they, who's gonna
Right.
buy it?
Well, and I'm,
first?
I'm curious what Rough Riders is gonna do with it from 8 to 4
No.
or 10 hours Monday through Friday. Like, what program are they gonna, programming can they do in there? And
Yeah,
is
I
that,
thought
are they
they-
gonna charge residents more if they, I don't know.
then have one pool but with like a line down the middle.
Right?
What, yeah, what do they need it 50 hours for a week? That's a
Yeah,
lot.
I can't even imagine what they're gonna.
I don't know.
Unless it's gonna be a therapy pool, which I guess maybe if it's gonna be warm.
I don't know.
There
I
can't
only
be that
know-
many therapy people.
I don't have any of that
The
background.
Yeah.
hockey
No,
players are
I-
not that hurt.
it kind of seems like a really bad first
Well,
offer.
anyway.
Like they just said, how much can we ask for? And they threw out some huge number.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right,
Anyway, I'll send you guys this,
Yeah.
tomorrow. I'll make sure.
Okay.
Okay.
all right, so let's move on to budget recommendations. Before we do that, I just realized, I guess Jacques right now you're technically the vice chair. And
I
you're
guess.
supposed to be
I don't
taking
know.
notes.
Ah,
You're supposed to be
taking
taking
a few
meeting
yeah,
notes.
notes. You got some notes, you got some notes?
I've got
I don't
Got
ever.
a
random
few.
scribbles.
So I'll try to work on the notes for what we just discussed, but if you can jot some notes
Yeah,
down,
jot
nothing
some.
like,
Yeah.
nothing insane, but start jotting some notes down for the rest of the agenda. All right, so budget recommendations, so, the way we kind of left it off after the last discussion was, we didn't really think that we were gonna have like any, at least big ask, for a, a budget recommendation for next year. I mean, I wanna say the general consensus was, if this ballot initiative goes forward, if, the town center park starts to get built next year, I mean, how is it that we would really have, a big request approved? I mean, the most likely, there's other recreation projects, even if they have dedicated funding happening. So we just need to revisit this and say, is there anything we really wanna ask for? So just a couple of things. One, I think staff is putting in a request for ADA compliance updates for parks. I mean, we've reviewed this as a committee. There was a report done by, I can't remember what consulting group a couple of years ago, when we also did our own kind of review of what could be playground improvements. Theirs largely focused on basically every park is out of compliance because of when they were built, out of compliance with like today's ADA standards. So this is what you would need to do. And there is a bunch of stuff, it's not like, oh, that's wonderful. I mean, it's like really benign stuff. Like you need to have a ramp go into the pit so that that wheelchairs can have access. Or, the gravel needs to be changed to soft surface or mulch, like ADA compliant material. That's what I think staff was gonna put in a request. I don't know if they were putting it for just like a couple parks or all the parks, I'm not sure. I think are also working on potentially putting in a request for Riverbend Park, as, you know, Ken Lish had made his public comment on. Now, this committee has it on their work plan this year to talk about that. We essentially tabled it until later in the year. And I think we have to question, do we even consider any type of budget recommendation of our own without having held any type of public meeting on this? You know, what I'm basically hearing is you have 1% of the homes that have maybe spoke up, you know, in that area that has spoke up on this topic. Is that enough? You know, especially when it's resident-driven and not committee-driven feedback that is requesting that. It's just, I'm posing the question, you know, playing devil's advocate there. But those are the things that have basically been tossed around so far. Now, for those that don't know, pickleball has now essentially been tabled until further discussion. It's not, so, you know, if this committee now, after all we've talked about pickleball, feels strongly about pickleball, maybe we make it as a recommendation for next year that, yes, you do go ahead with pickleball. That's another thing that we could consider, but,
When was it tabled? I guess I missed that.
Yeah, I
the
missed it too.
last board meeting.
Last board meeting.
I couldn't go to that board
It
meeting.
got voted
Okay.
down, flat out,
Oh,
voted down, gone, done.
It
It's not gonna
exceeded the
happen.
budget.
It's not,
Okay.
it
It what?
exceeded the budget, the board basically wouldn't approve the increase in the budget, the extra money. And so it's, for this year, I guess, essentially dead.
okay.
And so it won't be in next year's budget probably unless someone requests it to be. So whether a board member requests it to be in the budget again next year, like they did request it to be in the budget this year, or, you know, this committee requests it be in the budget next year, I mean, I'm sure it will be discussed again, but
I think the message from the board was that before we put things in the budget or commit to spend the money, we should hear, thanks to the commentary of Jim Payne and others, that we really need to hear from the community, similar to what happened with the Autry Dog Park and disc golf, that this is something that the community really wants to have. There were petitions and user groups that were developed, and so because of the fact that it exceeded the budget, we had not had a groundswell from, you know, they all agreed it was on your priority list. It is on the PROSTAC list, but we had not heard strongly from the community that there was a need or use, and there was a concern that if we put it in, maybe it won't get used because we haven't heard a strong comment from our residents. And so it's put on hold,
Yeah.
you know.
It'll come back.
Yeah, but I think if the, for the board to react and be supportive, we really want to hear some strong commentary from the community, petition, user groups, whatever it is, that there is a strong interest in seeing this happen.
I actually feel like you did get it from the meetings we held, but I'm not gonna debate that. I mean, I kind of feel like at this point, how much more community engagement can you have on a subject like that? I feel like we had a lot, but I'll just
I don't think it'll
sweep
come
that
back
aside.
until
So-
we get strong response from the community. That's my sense.
Well, it's still gonna be on our amenities list.
It's
not falling
on
off.
the amenities list,
I mean,
absolutely.
and the issue here more than anything else was the process and how we've just kind of thrown it somewhere instead of planning it out of where it would go best. That's my opinion, just my opinion.
Yeah. So,
I would encourage you to go back and watch the tape for that, just so you kind of get a sense of the discussion.
Yeah.
You know, Trustee Lasis brought up actually brought it up from a, you know, how did we actually get to the point where we are? Because he said, you know, I thought it had been a strong recommendation through a public process, from PROSTAC, and I said, well, it's actually number 10 on the amenities list. We did not ask them if this was the thing that they really wanted to spend $175,000. I did say in the future, I really think if we're going to put $175,000 that we've got available for community amenities, let's send it back to our resident experts and ask them for how they would like to see the $175,000 spent. You know, as Trustee Ryan said, you know, the reason it ended up in the budget was that the trustees were not willing to commit $175,000 for a town hall expansion. They felt strongly that if we're going to spend $175,000, it should be on something that directly benefits our residents.
I actually just thought of one more possible budget request, and that would be revamping of the disc golf course, adding irrigation and some terrain features. I believe staff was already starting to look at that too.
I remember Patrick talking about it.
So
Yeah, Patrick definitely mentioned that they were gonna irrigate, they were looking at.
They're looking to irrigate that area, yeah.
So is that an item that this committee would want to endorse? And then the final one, which gets tossed around like all the time and we never really do it, but is the master plan.
Master plan,
And, you know, we had attempted over the last year or two to make that more committee-driven update. And I think Corey and I both quickly agreed that this thing is just too big for us to do. It needs to have some type of paid consultant involvement to really revamp that thing. So I always hate recommending like consultants and not like a tangible like benefit to the town. But if the master plan is going to get updated, I think that does need to be it needs to be initiated somewhere, and that could be initiated by us making a recommendation that the town spend, I think it was around $50,000 to have that done. So another thing that we could recommend. So what's everyone's thoughts? Is there an item that I've said or that you can think of that I haven't said that you would like to see recommended for next year's budget?
I'm really sorry I missed the board meeting, but I think one of the agenda items was the build out of that segment. I can't remember the property name.
The
Anderson, the one
Yeah.
we discussed last month?
Yeah, and the idea that if we were gonna build another park in this area of Rock Creek, that if we could get the builder to maybe build that. So to maybe not put that on a budget request, I guess is what
Well, right, I mean, if that was a request of a development, then that would
Yeah.
not need to be a budget request.
Right.
Whereas if we wanted to put a playground, for example, in Riverbend Park,
Mhm.
that would.
That
be a
would
budget-
have to be,
That
yeah.
would have to be a budget request.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get that paid by anyone else.
Right, exactly.
So is Ken's thought process up at the top of the sledding hill for a park? Is that what he's
I don't know
envisioning? Do we know?
specifically.
I've
what-
walked that area so many times and I've tried to envision, because I think that whole
corner?
area at the top of the sledding hill and certainly the bottom, I mean, that's all
It's all like,
drainage
yeah.
and
It's gonna be at the top.
it would have to be at the
Top of-
top.
My understanding is
north corner.
that no, the only place that really functionally works is like right on the edge of the pond, and that has its own problems.
Right.
Well, there's one piece of land between the pond and, I forgot what street that is, but
Yeah,
it's not, Riverbend goes around the outside of it, but the
Mhm.
other side, so where Riverbend connects at the stop sign, there's a open piece of land right there. That's why, I
yeah.
mean, I don't know.
You're
if
talking about like where right now there's like a picnic bench?
Yeah, right, there's a picnic,
Yeah.
there's not much room there.
Yeah,
really
it's not
Yeah.
very much room.
Tot park, it wouldn't be a big, I mean, it's definitely something to discuss. It's not the first time this has come up. We've discussed this 5 years ago, I think. We discussed putting a basketball court there. Would that be an opportunity to put a basketball court there? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think it probably should be on our agenda at some point. I mean, it is at the end of the year, it needs to continue to be discussed,
Yeah.
so.
Riverbend Park?
Yeah. It's just, do we have enough information to make the
Exactly, yeah.
recommendation for next year's budget? Knowing that we have to have that basically done now or
Soon.
next month?
No, I don't think we have
Yeah.
enough information. I think my only budgetary thing I keep thinking of is now that they decided not to do pickleball court, what are they gonna do with that money? It's been designated for something for the community, since we're not gonna add on to this place.
What's our top amenity priority?
Well, I
Yeah.
guess my first
I
question
don't
is,
know.
you don't know? It wasn't discussed, that I know for sure, because I listened to the
I
meeting.
mean,
It
the
was not-
irrigation is
It was not
definitely
brought
one.
up, what are we gonna do with that money? And my first thought that crossed my mind is there's a lot of popularity about that skate park. And I don't know if it's over budget or if it's gonna fit under budget. And if it was even discussed that that would be an option to take that extra funding and make sure the skate park is done right.
Well, or even
I
if
don't know.
the skate park itself doesn't need any extra budget, we've talked about, well, should that path leading to the skate park actually be paved?
Yep,
Should there be
exactly.
a shade pavilion, alongside the bike park, skate park?
Yep.
So could you do any of those things? Well, yeah, so to go to next year's budget, I'm actually in favor of one of two things. One would either be disc golf improvements, and whether this actually needs a budget request, just in general, especially now that the pickleball is kind of gone from Autry, a master plan for the Autry Park. Come to a conclusion as to whether is the disc golf going to stay, and if it is, what's it going to look like, and if it's not going to stay, what can that space be used for instead? And because there's lots of things that could go there, whether it's pickleball as discussed, whether it's dog park too, like little dog park, like I'm talking like
Yeah.
your little dogs, or is it courts and fields and whatever, like what else? You have a piece of land that if you're not going to use it properly for disc golf, does it get used for something else? And we talked about this in this committee. That area needs its own little master plan.
That's a great, and then, the last meeting, we talked about shade at the dog park too, which I know that definitely, which would fall into that master plan.
That was a public comment,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
I don't think we really discussed it.
Right.
Well, we
But
put one in.
We put in the little one that's
Mhm.
at I believe at the back. I don't go to the dog park.
It's
I
in the-
believe they
it's in the
installed
back
it at the
middle,
back.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, there's, you could throw that into the kind of master plan
Master plan for
for
that whole
Autry is, improvements to the existing dog park, improvements to the existing bike park, as well as, all the other things that I just said. So I actually think that that's probably the next thing that needs to be focused on. It's just the Autry Park area in general. If nothing's gonna happen with Town 15, and if, that we don't have some other big project to work on, I think that Autry is one to focus on.
I think the other part of the budget truly comes down to, is there gonna be a ballot initiative? Because that's gonna, if it decides not to be a ballot initiative this year, maybe they push it out a year, which I heard some conversation about, maybe that's what we should do, but anyway, I think by next meeting, well, we have to have it by August, right? Usually the August meeting, we have to have the recommendation.
I think we usually have to have ours done by July. I think by August,
Is it too
it's
late? I don't
already
remember.
going to the board. Initial budget is going to the
Well, we
board.
usually have discussions for a couple months and then come up with
Yeah.
I can't remember if it's July or August, it could be July, I don't
I
remember.
think it's
so.
July.
So next month.
Yeah.
if we can't make a recommendation this month, I think you still technically would have until next month to make one. So any other ideas or preferences for what we might recommend? Do we want to recommend anything tonight, or, you know, think on it and leave the recommendation until next month?
I'd like to see what happens on July 9th and
That's how I'm feeling
July
too.
4th goes, and when we finally get the information back from last night, that's just my opinion. I'd rather try to get some more information on that to see if we, you know, if there's a need for us to put something out there relevant to the whole election or not, so.
I'm in
Fine.
agreement with that.
Yeah, I am too.
Okay. So we'll continue that discussion next month. So that brings us to weed and pest management. So this is our annual review of what staff and Vargas are currently doing for
This year.
the weed and pest management program.
Hi, everybody. I just pulled up our webpage on the website, which is a way that we try to keep everyone up to date on what's happening. And as you can see, we have different tabs. One of them is, you know, where you can click and kind of see which spot applications are occurring, and the dates, the last dates, which is probably around some of our biggest rains. And it also provides information on the approach, which is an integrated pest management approach, where there are, you know, evaluations of areas and monitoring of different areas, and depending on the specific type, you know, different applications are initiated. There's also measurements for not only weeds, but mosquitoes, algae in the ponds, you know, kind of our basic stuff that we go over every year.
So what is often a hot topic, at least amongst us small contingent of the community, is the use of pesticides.
Well,
And-
we have certain common complaints that are sent up to our office, and you know, so we control these problems in specific ways, such as synthetic chemicals for broadleaf weed control in like turf areas, such as some of the parks that are more manicured. Noxious weed control in open space, such as like the thistles, the really high thistles that you encounter sometimes. Also, larvicide and adulticide for mosquito control, and aquatic herbicides for algae in our ponds. Duckweed is another one that pops up, and it kind of covers the top of the ponds in like a green carpet almost. Also, we have ash borers and engraver bark beetles in our trees. You know, that's something we kind of keep an eye on. You know, that would be something, another type of insecticide that would be used. And there's specific chemicals that that are typically used that are, you know, and all of that information can also be found on our webpage.
Well, and that's what the town sends out the announcements on,
Mhm.
when those are gonna be used. But the two things I just wanted to add, and, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we've always been told is that the town goes to great lengths to control, you know, at least with, let's say, the weeds, to control weeds with other measures before they ever apply pesticides. So they will have Vargas do a large amount of hand pulling of weeds
That is correct.
prior to the decision to apply any type of pesticide. And then the second comment that, you know, that goes along with the, you know, community feedback on, you know, the use of pesticides is well, no, you should only be using, you know, your natural, more organic weed control. And the town has tested those options before, and they are not efficient, at least to maintain the level of landscaping that is expected in this town. And so essentially they can't be used. Like, you know, people will say, oh, use vinegar rather than Roundup. It's like, well, you can't do that on a large lawn area. I mean, yes, you can do that in, you know, your rock areas and stuff, but it kills grass. It kills everything. It doesn't kill just the weed. And so I just want to, you know, point out that the town reviews all these options, and it's not like they're just set on using controversial pesticides in excess.
Correct. We've tested things like corn gluten and organic pre-emergent treatments, which are treatments that are put on the areas kind of before they get larger and start seeding. And we've relatively had poor results from those things. But we every year review these newer items and try to review alternative organic control products. And, you know, they've just been less effective 3 to 4 times some of the more traditional types of mitigation. But we always try to do the environmentally sensitive approach for managing weeds and pests.
Allison, we had some issues this year with some concerns about pesticides and fertilizer and stuff applied down at the dog park, and communication with, you know, because that's a concentrated area where people go. I seem to remember that we made some new decisions about how we would communicate with those users. Can you update the committee on what we did there?
Yes, one of the main strategies that we're going to definitely be using is posting right on the gate. And, you know, as people come in, not only trying to send it out in our newsletters and various media sources, we're definitely going to be putting a sign right on that gate to make sure anybody, as a last stand for us in a marketing way, that people know.
Did you say how far in advance you'd be doing it? Because I think that was part of what people were freaked out about. It happened and they didn't know. Are you going to be posting it in advance so they know it?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So like a week, 10 days, something like that, or?
Correct.
Okay.
As soon as we set up the
Your schedule.
application and the schedule, then
Okay.
we'll make sure to post it, and also send it out through our normal outlets and
I was
channels that we
thinking,
usually
will
do.
you physically post the notice at the dog park as well as through the other channels like the glass?
Correct, like on the gate
Yeah.
where you would be going in.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
And those
Just wanna make sure that
applications are normally an organic compound. And
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
thanks.
So next is the youth program at Wildflower Park. This was an item that was on like either 1 or 2 agendas before this and basically got tabled because of time. So wanna, since we do have a little bit more time tonight, I did wanna make sure we tackle it and not delay it too much longer into the year. So, and I now can't recall where it was, but some board members, I don't know if it was at our dinner or somewhere else, had expressed some interest in seeing that the Wildflower Park, like Great Lawn, be actually programmed so that youth teams, lessons, whatever, could hold practices on that area and not just have it as a like a free-for-all, which is basically what it is now. And I don't know exactly what the genesis of that is, but one benefit of having a program, aside from the fact that the town actually makes some revenue off of it, is that you have a little bit more control over who is using it, and that it's actually being used by groups that are comprised largely of town residents. So you don't just have, like, if those who remember the Founders, where you had like the Frisbee golf, or ultimate Frisbee,
yeah.
ultimate Frisbee users, those were largely out of town groups that just knew that there was a field in Superior that they could come use. And so they would come and use it, and it caused a lot of conflicts, and they put the boulders in basically so that it could not be used for ultimate Frisbee anymore. And, we don't want to see something like that happen. At least I'm saying, I don't want to see something like that happen at Wildflower Park, that we have a, potentially, very nice neighborhood, community park, whatever you want to call it, be overrun by like out-of-town groups if it gets out there that it's there. So, the other question I do have, Allison, is the gazebo and the pavilion at Wildflower reservable right now?
Let me check on that. I believe so.
I know I brought this up early on, like before the park was open. I said, I asked that staff and the board, consider letting that be booked. And this is another discussion we've had at Founders as to whether the pavilion at Founders, because originally it was said that park should not have any programming. And, we did end up putting some limited scheduling of the pavilion, and then after that, some limited programming on the baseball diamond. And so it would, I don't know if that was carried over, if it was just accepted that you would be able to reserve the pavilions.
Yeah, the east and west shelters are reservable by resident, non-resident, and nonprofit.
Okay, so what we're really talking about then is just the field at this point. So that's everyone's
Is it being,
thoughts on
do you
this.
know if it's being used? I mean, is it being reserved?
I
The
think it has
pavilions?
been reserved for graduation parties and some different things.
Are they? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we've been to a few birthday parties there and all that.
I think I saw a Frisbee party up there one day, so, just saying.
I mean,
They gotta go somewhere.
yeah, I'm in favor of it for basically the two reasons I just said, in reasons why you would do it is, one, the town can make a little money off of it, and two, you have a little bit more control over its use, and hopefully reduce conflict over its use.
Are we getting requests? Do you know? Does anybody know if we're getting requests to use that field?
I think we have gotten a few requests, but since it is non-programmable, we don't
I mean, it was
reserve
originally designed not to be programmed. It was actually,
No,
we-
that was never explicitly said
but
for
we
this.
put the wrong grass in for the
Right,
field.
it was not,
Right, a sports field.
yeah, correct. It was not physically designed to be used
Right.
as a
It's got a
sport
little-
field.
I mean, I don't know,
Well, it's level,
yeah.
but the
Get the
type of
drop-offs
grass and the maintenance that it gets is not not equivalent to what it would be if it were actually used as like a soccer field.
So, do we want to encourage it to be reservable by teams if it's not the right turf for it?
Or just for practices, or what?
Well, yes.
I mean, again, I think this is why we're talking about youth. So, you know, we have, for example, the YMCA youth programs that use the West Field at Community Park. I mean, that has some issues, again, as we have discussed multiple times
Right.
in this committee, about, you know, they end up cutting that grass shorter, and then that causes it to die out,
Right.
especially in the heat of the summer. And so it's difficult to maintain, it doesn't have the proper drainage. So, you know, if we program it at Wildflower, does that mean staff is gonna start cutting that grass equally as short and have some of the same problems? I mean, that's something to consider. Jim?
Jim Payne again, if I just offer an historical perspective on Founders, one of the reasons why we ended up putting the boulders across there was that would then make it unusable for the ultimate frisbee, because it was just the sheer size of the field that was attracting the ultimate frisbee people. But if you remember, the other side of that, Peter, was that the town staff, Parks and Rec staff, didn't feel they could program it even if we wanted to because of staff limitations. I mean, if you're going to program it, you've got to police it, you've got to. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see whether there is any demand for people, because I've never really seen other uses of I look out on the community park multi-purpose fields, and I've never really seen anything else there. I mean, I see individuals using it, playing frisbee, but it's never attracted other groups. So I don't know whether the Wildflower Field is attracting other groups and there's that kind of demand. But anyway, my point is that staff has to be able to police it if they're going to reserve it.
I think it would get the same level as the baseball fields and Williams Field, and I mean, I don't think it requires that much policing on the part of staff unless, you know, someone does have it reserved and then someone else is trying to use it at the same time. But I've never really heard of those conflicts existing today. I think it's generally accepted that if someone says they've reserved the field and they're using it, that people leave them be.
You might consider.
Well, that wasn't the.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the other thing that you guys could consider is similar to what we did with the ball field at Founders. We limited the use to
Right.
certain times a day. That's just an option you might want to consider. Is,
Right.
okay, we'll do it 3 days a week or something. You know, that's just something to throw out there if you want to think about that.
And I did get a text from Corey. He's saying he thinks that that we did design Wildflower Park so that it could be used more for sport use. He thinks that there is the right type of grass on that field. I don't know if it has the right type of grass. I'm almost positive it probably has better drainage than Westfield at
Yeah.
Community Park. So at least that issue, because we know that is an issue at the Westfield, is going to be less. Whether it has the right grass, I mean, Patrick would have to answer that question as to whether if we cut that short, if it would hold up better. I don't know the answer.
I think part of the thing too, early in the building and the construction of the park, is that the grass had to be established. So I'm not sure if it's the difference of the type of grass or the need for it to be established for a certain period of time before it can be utilized in that nature.
But I definitely think it's level. I believe it's fairly perfectly level, and it's, you know, the irrigation and the drainage is probably better thought out than Westfield is. But I do agree with what Sandy said. If we were to, you know, I am kind of favoring it being programmed, but I would say yes. Limit it to when we think, I can't remember exactly what we did with Founders in the end, but we said something like, it can only be programmed for like 10 hours a week. And we got a little bit more specific, so it was like, it could only be between the hours of like 8 and 1 on Saturdays and Sundays, and
Just Saturdays.
or
Just
was it
Saturday,
only
4 to 6.
Saturdays?
And it was
And it could only be no more than like 2 hours on an afternoon, weekday afternoon, and total could not exceed like 10 hours in a week.
Right.
It was very specific, and we really haven't heard any complaints about it since. I mean,
And it was only for T-ball.
it was, well, right, it was for only the one sport,
Small
so,
kids, yeah.
I mean, in this case, we're not gonna limit the sports, but we're gonna say it's only for the lawn. It's like, we're not talking about the basketball court or the volleyball court, we're talking about the lawn. But it could be, I don't see any reason to limit it. It could be lacrosse, it could be soccer. It could
Well,
be-
I would probably think about limiting the age, because you don't want the 15, my daughter's 16, and, they'll
I-
take the whole field over, it's not that big, so.
And some of the notes from 2015 from PROSTAC, it's recommending up to 6 hours of programmable time on the T-ball field for the months of April through June.
It was only 6 hours a week? Or was it 6 hours on Saturday?
I think it was a week.
So we-
Because they didn't want to tie it up all day on Saturday.
I know
And
we were
so it
conscious
was
of
like,
that.
so they could have a practice and I think games or something, and it's not on any of the schedules, that you can just go in and rent it. It's, yeah, I mean, I think it was for a specific group.
Right.
No, it was just one group, and the fear was, well, what do we do if another group comes forward and wants to take advantage of the field? Because legally, we probably have to do that. At least that was the thought at the time from staff. But no one ever really came forward.
Well, yeah,
So it worked out. But
I thought it was, at the time, there was one group that was basically asking for
Right.
it. And we said, we did not name that group in the recommendation. So the idea was that in the beginning, it would basically go to the one group, but should a second group
we'd have to accommodate
ask,
them.
then we would say, then those hours need to be shared. There needs to be some type of,
But we crossed our
working
fingers
out
and it never
of-
happened. They never came, no one
Yeah,
else
it's
ever
just,
came
we never
forward.
got a second group.
But I just, if I could just comment on this, one of the reasons we were so careful with Founders is that, when we built the park, that was a very, very well thoroughly discussed issue. So it was also a thoroughly discussed and issue at Wildflower, and there was a lot of objection from nearby neighbors to programming it. So you can't bind future boards and all that sort of thing, but you do need to be careful about, for the next park that comes up, or the next facility, it says, well, we're not gonna allow programming, and then they say, yeah, well, you said that for Founders, and now, or you said that for Wildflower, and here, 3 years later, you're
So-
programming it. So I think, my comment is to keep it very tightly circumscribed with clear definitions, and that's the way to do that, rather than have it be too open-ended, that's all.
My recollection of Wildflower is that, there was some concern over like full sports field. And so that Great Lawn was designed so that it was not like a full-size field.
Correct.
It was not necessarily the right grass, or at least it wasn't gonna be maintained as that, and it was not gonna be lighted. But in turn, there was no explicit declaration at the time that it would not be programmed. It was just designed to discourage, certain use. So for this type of use, like, your younger youth programming, I don't know that anyone ever actually said to the neighbors in that area, this will not happen.
Because we didn't, because you don't, because you can't bind a future board.
Right, but
So
apparently
it's-
that's what the residents around Founders were told, and they
Right.
continue to
So
bring it up.
essentially, I don't know if this is ever embedded as policy, but the practice has always been, in the way, when I was involved with PROSTAC, the way we handled that was that any changes or variance in that practice of not programming had to be approved by the trustees.
Well, no, it does. We would just be making a recommendation to the trustees. I mean,
And I think, I'm just saying, do what we did with the ball field and make it clearly defined, circumscribed, specific hours, whatever makes sense, and get the board to approve it.
I mean, Ron, what would be, you know better probably than anyone here, what would be the, like, age groups of youth sports that
Well, yeah, I
that
think
you
once
might want to cap it at?
Yeah, I mean, once you start getting 15 and up, I think you're asking for a different practice. And the one thing we have to avoid is not letting them have games there, because that
Yeah.
was discussed. That was a very big part of all the
So
places.
practice only.
But, and I guess I would just refer to the staff. I mean, how do you, what's the best way to? That's what we did with the ball field. We asked them, how can you manage it? Because it's got to be managed, and if you're going to manage it, say, okay, under a certain age group, certain times we'll program it. I mean, is that feasible?
Well, I think also, if you're talking about the T-ball field specifically, that's at Founders, the measurements are for T-ball.
Right.
So it's just a smaller field, and really the only users that it would be the appropriate size for would be the T-ball groups.
Yeah.
But it really would come down to what staff could manage before we even recommend anything to the board, because I'd want to get feedback from you guys saying, you guys are crazy if you think we can manage this, or you guys say, no, this would be very easy to manage, it wouldn't add any more time and
It could be easy to manage, but if it's used more by more user groups, then the budget for maintaining the area would need to go up.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I would just see certain parameters, like,
See, I
No.
mean, because we go back to Founders, and what keeps coming back to me is we said, okay, Little League Baseball, that's what it's for. It was a very easy, but when you start talking about an open field up there, there's enough room to practice soccer for any age group. There's enough room to practice lacrosse. You got the zip line up there. You get the other amenities. You really want sticks being, if people come up there and do 3-4 people throwing a lacrosse stick, I don't see any issues with that. But you start getting 20 kids up there for a lacrosse practice, not sure that's where we want to send them. Now, if you're starting to talk about 4 to 8-year-old soccer kids, then it's probably a
Right.
different conversation.
well, yeah, I mean, I would say, if you set some parameters, it would be
Right.
something like practices only, no games. For youth programming under, 12 and under, or you could say under 15, whatever you think's more appropriate. And, no more than 10 hours per week over all user groups, and it cannot be programmed after like 12 noon on a Saturday and never on a Sunday, like something like that.
Have we had a specific group constantly asking or not?
I was just asking
Yeah,
the
that's-
same thing.
Not that
That
I
you
know
know
of.
Yeah.
I mean, what
Yeah,
I've
that's
always
not-
heard from Patrick is that anytime someone asks
They say-
about, oh, can I reserve at Founders or can I reserve at Wildflower, he just has to say,
No.
we don't program those spaces.
Right.
And so you can go use it if you want. Like, it's not, I don't know if he specifically says that last part, but that's what he's indicating, is
Right.
that we don't control it. And so right now, it is not controlled. I don't know how it's being used, but it's not controlled.
Have we had any issues up there, Allison, with conflicts with groups being up there and, scarfing because too many are up there or anything like that?
At Wildflower, not at all.
Yeah, or any neighbors complaining?
Well, because
No,
that's where
not that I
the
know
original
of.
programming came up over here, was the fights at the sheds and
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, we kind of forced our hand to program that, so.
So Corey's adding that he likes the specific reduced hours. He also believes Patrick has stated that staff actually spends more on the unprogrammed fields as they're not controlled like the wear on the program fields is. So, basically if the town's controlling it and saying it can only be used for 10 hours a week, then it's only getting used for 10 hours a week and they're maintaining it for that type of use. If the town's not controlling it, it could potentially be used 30 hours a week, and it's outside of the town's control, so it's actually gonna get more wear in the current state than if you just limited it.
It can be used outside of programming.
Well, it could be used
Oh, yeah.
informally outside of programming, but,
Yeah, still go up 8.
It could be programmed 3 days a week, and then the other 4, you got people up there using it all the time. So I'm not sure I remember Patrick ever saying that.
except that if the town does program it and it starts getting heavy use outside of the programmed hours, I would think the town would have some grounds to try to say, no, you can not use it, like for teams at least, in the unprogrammed hours. I mean, that would require some enforcement, but I'm pretty sure like right now, if you just had teams informally using like the baseball diamonds, the town would have the right to basically tell them to leave.
When I think also the majority of time, the user groups like to have a specific place booked and scheduled so that
They guarantee they have.
have
Right.
guaranteed it, and then parents don't have to run to pick up, if, for example, it was enforced, then I would assume that they would be afraid parents would have to come and get the kids and do all of that.
So Corey thinks that Autry or I don't know, maybe he meant Founders, because then he said Founders, has more maintenance issues. I think he means Founders. So I can't, again, recall specifically what Patrick has. I do recall him saying something along those lines, but I don't remember the specifics. That yeah, basically when it's just open-ended, it ends up, the staff can't plan for the way it's being used. So,
Well, my thoughts on this, as far as going forward, is we should get feedback, give Patrick and staff a direct question.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on this? Do you have any concerns about us programming it? Do you think we should program it? And then get their information back from that concept and say, okay, let's send something to the board next chance we get to say, hey, let's come. Well, you don't really have to worry about programming it till the summer's over, because there's no sports going on technically right now. It's all,
right.
until
Like,
August, there's
yeah.
no soccer. So that's my
All right,
thought.
so, yeah, we'll see what Patrick can provide as feedback on this
And I
issue. And
don't want to sound like I'm not in favor of programming. I'm just trying to ask all the questions. So I think
Yeah.
we should seriously consider programming it. And I think, but this got to be done the right way. So just following the Autry model or the Founders model.
And I think I would add to that question is whether there have been specific inquiries about programming from what kinds of sports, what age groups? Because I know
Yeah,
that
yeah.
a lot of things are already being covered at Boulder Valley School District fields, from my own experience, so.
Yeah, and following along on that, this is a primary, it's not all superior players, but there's a lot of superior players on those baseball teams. I know the club, it used to be Y, now it's FC Boulder runs the Y, or So just little questions like that. Is there a specific club that would be sensible for Superior residents to use?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, again, I've not done any of these programs, but the way I understand it is, don't they, like, doesn't like FC Boulder, don't they usually like to group their teams, like if they can, like if they have enough kids in Superior, they try to like group a team as, like at least with the younger kids.
The younger kids,
As like a Superior team. And so, like, whereas their games might be in Boulder or whatever fields, their practices are up to the, you know, coach, parents, whatever, that
Yeah,
are,
the parents
that are
are-
coaching them. And so if they're like a Superior FC Boulder team, they would look most likely for whatever the closest field they can get to Superior is. And so that's where, that's like probably who's basically doing like the pickup on, you know, Wildflower now or Westfield now, or I think even at the South Pool in that little grass area, some of them might go up there just for practices. That's all you're talking about. You're not talking about games, because that stuff's all programmed on the bigger fields. We're just talking about like the little kid practices where they pretty much just need a pitch of grass somewhere.
Yep.
And I think they do that. They will try to share a field if they can. So that's the use that I'm envisioning
Good.
for this. Okay. So updates, we've already kind of discussed 4th of July breakfast. So yeah, I mean, anyone that can be there, does anyone know that they can be there?
I'll be there.
Okay, and I'll try to be there, even though technically I won't be a PROSTAC member anymore. I'll try to be there.
Well, have they decided on 2 or 1 tent? Al, do you know? 1 or 2? They
I
putting
think
us all
Patrick
together.
said we were going to have our own tent at this one.
My understanding is right now that PROSTAC would have their own tent.
Yeah,
Would have.
will.
Will
yeah.
have, okay.
So yeah, I mean, for those that haven't gone before, they have the downhill mile and then the parade and then
Pancakes.
and then the pancakes start after. So it's usually like, they
Do we
say
ever-
9, but it's usually more like 9:15, 9:30, and then it goes to like noonish. So yeah, if you can be there, always seems to be like the hottest day. It's like the 4th of July, when you're sitting out there in that field, always manages to be like the hottest day.
Do we have giveaways or not? Do you know?
Well,
Did you
yeah,
give-
we have the frisbee, those frisbee discs that we didn't get to give out at Autry, or at Arbor Day, right?
Oh, that's
Okay.
cool.
So we got something to give away. Okay, good. And the boards. Got to have the boards.
Yeah, well,
We need to have the
make
presentation we
sure
had last night needs to
we
be
have what we
at
had
the
last night.
at the tent. So
So pickleball update, we basically already talked about that. It's not gonna happen this year. You know, discuss it again if you want as your budget recommendation for next year. And then Anderson FDP scheduled to go to planning commission on July 3rd, so this, I guess, is the same proposal that we already looked at. I thought it had already gone to planning commission. I guess it hasn't? Because we looked at this last month.
Yeah.
Is it any different than what we looked at last month?
I don't believe so, because OSAC also looked at it last week. So I don't have anything
Okay.
new on that.
So it's just continuing its process. You know, we made a recommendation on it, which was basically that the trails be,
Yep.
you know, paved to the town standard, not unpaved, and that, you know, ideally that they were responsible for both trails, one that would connect on that north end into potentially, or eventually, the US 36 bikeway, and then what's the existing trail. And then we also said that there should be a consideration for some type of playground with that density of homes. So, see what, do you remember, Allison, do you recall what OSAC said?
I think one of the recommendations was to leave the trail that was on the south portion more natural
Mhm.
for diversity of trails in town. And also
So counter the what we said.
the trail to the west between the new and the old developments.
Which is the social trail right now?
Well, which was gonna be formalized, I think, in the plan.
Well, so the plan, the way they had it was where you have Coal Creek Drive, sorry, not Marshall, Coal Creek Drive. And then you have the existing, like, development and trail basically has a concrete path that just dead ends. And so the FTP that they were proposing was pave that little stretch on like the west side. And then the east of Coal Creek Drive over the basically 88th, leave natural. And we
No.
said,
They said the trail to the south, which is below, you're talking the 88th trail and then the trail between the two developments, but there's also,
no, I'm talking about the
Another-
one that runs along the southern portion.
oh, okay,
I'm talking about,
Yes.
when I say development, I mean Rock Creek. Like,
okay.
there's, cause you have.
To the west of the development?
To the west of the development is like
Mhm.
Rock Creek. So the FDP from Anderson basically had that little portion to the west of Coal Creek Drive, on the southern portion, paved that, but then they left the rest of it natural. And we basically said, no, if you're gonna pave it, pave the whole thing for accessibility reasons. And you're basically saying, OSAC's saying, no, leave it unpaved.
We
Leave it in
basically
Well,
want
and the rest
developer
of
to pay for
my
it.
comment was that on the west side, the trail that you were talking about before the south trail, that they wanted that area as large as possible between, for a natural buffer.
Right, okay. Okay. Well, that's all we got, so meeting adjourned.